Welcome to the Midweek Mailbag, your Detroit Lions midweek podcast where we answer your Detroit Lions questions that you submit on Twitter, that you submit email. However, I mean, if you have a carrier pigeon, I'd take it that way too. Drone? That would, I don't know, that made me feel a little unnerving to see a drone dropping just an envelope in my front door. That would not feel great. But anyway.
It's basically the same thing as a carrier pigeon. That's right. Exactly the same.
No fax number at this point. Maybe you can send one to what's the Lions address? I don't even remember.
222 Republic Allen Park, Michigan.
There you go. Send it that way, and then I'll get a weird email saying, "Why is there a letter for you?" asking why Broderick Martin hasn't played yet. My name, by the way, is Jeremy Reisman. You can find me at Detroit Online on social medias. With me, as always, already part of the podcast, your managing editor, the machine, at Erik Schlitt on Twitter. It's Erik Schlitt, buddy.
Hey,
how
buddy.
we doing?
All right, it's been a busy morning.
Yeah.
Anticipation of a potential storm headed our way.
Apocalypse.
Just another eventful winter here in Detroit.
Yeah, I think we've kind of gotten mild winters as of late, so this one's kind of interesting. But we're talking about no one wants to hear us talk about the weather, especially when you're listening. It's like 3 days after it snows.
No, you want to get hunkered down and nice and cozy.
Yeah,
listen to people talk about the Lions.
We'll listen to the dulcet tones of our voices. Talking about Lions football. Free agency's coming up. We're about a month away from free agency. We're 2 weeks away from the NFL Combine, so some of the questions are going to be about those two things in general. There are going to be some other stuff like coaching things that we're going to talk about as well. Let's start here with Grant Voss at the Detroit Buff on Twitter. Asks, who, in your opinion, or what you've heard from being around the facility, will be priority free agent re-signings? I have my own opinions, but I'm curious as to what you guys think and what you've been hearing.
Well, I haven't really been hearing much, so put that out there right off the bat. This is the anything that I have to say on it is basically just stuff that I've already written, because I did a rankings before, and so one of the things that I pointed out in the rankings is that with this regime, they typically bring back almost exactly half of their free agents. So sometimes that means, more lower half guys, quote unquote lower half guys don't come back. Could be like last year, they lost a lot of their quote unquote high end guys, like Jonah Jackson, Gardner Johnson, right? They lost some of their higher priority free agents, I guess you could say. So this year I kind of expect it to flip again. A couple of the guys at the top, I think, will be priorities, but will they come back or not? I don't know. So Zeitler is the guy that I had at the top of. Actually, I think he was second. Carlton Davis was first, and Zeitler was second. I think Zeitler is the one that makes the most sense for him to return. It makes sense for him. It makes sense for Detroit. But Carlton is the guy I had ahead. He's more of an unknown for me. I don't know if he's going to be affordable. I don't know if they're going to want to invest that kind of money. I think they should, personally. We've talked about this in previous podcasts, whether it was on the PODD newsletter podcast or mailbag that we did. But I think Carlton's going to be one of the top guys. He's a bit of an unknown. Zeitler should be back, and then I think the next couple of guys are unknowns as well. Like what's going to happen with Levi? What's going to happen with Derek Barnes? We're not entirely sure how much of this defensive front is going to change. And so I think a lot of their kind of priority guys more of them are up in the air than like for sure returns. The Zeitler is the only guy. Tim Patrick, I think those should both be easy re-sign guys.
Yeah, I would say the priorities are those top two, Carlton Davis, Kevin Zeitler. And then I think the easier ones, as you get kind of further down the list of, depth guys, I think Tim Patrick is another one of those. I think Dan Skipper, Khalil Dorsey are guys that are probably easy sign backs. They love Khalil, right? He's already,
Yeah,
maybe
certainly.
inarguably their best gunner, and that's an important position to them.
I think special teamer in general, non-kicking special
Yeah.
teamer, because he plays multiple phases. So yeah, I agree with that.
Right. I do want to go back to Carlton Davis because I feel like that's a huge domino
Yes.
in this free
Yes.
agency. And I think people are quick to forget how much this staff loved him. They're quick to say, well, Amik played on the outside at the end of the season, and that's fine. I remember Dan Campbell telling a specific story about how he went up to Carlton Davis in a team meeting and was like, hey, just so you know, you're killing it. And he told the media, like, I think that was our best offseason move, or one of the best. And so I hear that and I say, I think the Lions might be willing to spend to bring him back.
Yeah. He could be their biggest signing,
yes.
Whether re-signing or signing in general.
Yes.
He could.
And you know what Brad Holmes has said multiple times is like, you all want splash signings, but sometimes our splash signings are going to be re-signings, and we think those are splash moves.
Yep.
And so exactly. I think Carlton. I'm with you. I think Carlton Davis might be the guy that gets the biggest contract from Detroit this offseason, not including Aiden Hutchinson, because Aiden's going to get it. He's going to get paid a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah. I certainly expect that to be the splash, right?
Yes.
But as far as acquisitions or reacquisitions, Carlton could lead the list. And I know for some people that's going to be disappointing because so often we enter free agency periods with people wanting big names to come in.
$50 million in cap space, Erik. We got to spend it.
Yeah. You have a bunch of re-signs. Like you could see Kirby Joseph re-signed this offseason as well. And so, if they lose Levi, maybe they attack defensive tackle a little bit more. Sure. It's also deep defensive tackle draft, and with DJ Reader being in a contract year, they could be the route that they go instead. And so there's a lot of options on which direction they can go, but I do think retaining and maintaining are going to be the top priority, and it does start with Carlton.
It's going to drive people crazy, especially with how this offseason started with all the Myles Garrett talk. It's going to drive people crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing with the offseason. In the draft, it's easier to explain, I guess, this scenario, but people get these really big ideas in their head, and then they're often left with disappointment when the result is something not as significant in their minds. But in the end, if the team gets better, that's what you're hoping for. Right. Like if the team is adding some stability for the future, that's what you're hoping for. And so that's one of the things that concerns me the most when talk about Myles Garrett comes up. Like, just look back to the trade deadline of this season when everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, Max Crosby, what a impact Max Crosby could be," and most of the beat was like, "It's going to be Za'Darius Smith. Just prepare yourself for it." And then it was, and that's what it was. Yeah. And then people were like, "Womp womp." And then Za'Darius was fine. Like he did a good job. He was impactful, and he wasn't elite, but they couldn't really afford elite. That wasn't the direction they could go, and so I'm worried a Myles Garrett scenario is happening again here, where you're like, oh, it's good. Look, what could it be? What could it be? And then it's going to be they didn't. And now it's like everything else will be a disappointment. I hope we don't go that route, but inevitably that's where we'll end up.
Yeah. And maybe it's a good reminder, a good reason to remind people that the team that wins March, that wins free agency, that wins the offseason, not usually the team that's winning in January. How many years running have the Chicago Bears won the offseason?
2 or 3 now.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Still hanging with free agency, talking about more of their internal free agents here. Ash Soden asks, what are your thoughts, predictions on the quote-unquote injury-prone players who are slated to become free agents? Levi, Ifatu Melifanu, Kamish, Derek Barnes. Now, these are all the tough ones for me. Like, a lot of these are very much coin flips. I literally just published an article on Iffy and my thoughts on him, and I want to start there because I think that is the toughest of the group for me, because I think given the fact that he's missed 7 or more games in 3 out of his 4 seasons means he's going to be cheap. Right? He's not going to garner a big contract. I can't imagine anyone giving him more than a 1 or 2 year deal. We know the Lions love versatile guys in their secondary, a guy that can play safety, a guy that can play nickel, a guy that can play outside corner if you're in a pinch. And that's why Will Harris hung around in this franchise even after the Matt Patricia era. And he gives them something that they don't have. Right? They don't have a guy who is that good of a blitzer. They don't have, I mean, the closest they have is Brian Branch. Brian Branch does a whole lot of other different things. And so it's a different flavor. Yet, all of that being said, depth has been so important to this team. Reliable depth. Last year was a very significant sign where it's like, we need guys that can go out there when a hurricane hits our roster and we've got no one left. And I don't know if you can trust Fatu Melifonwu to be that guy. It's a very hard decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially when if he's going to want to prove himself, and he still has a lot of confidence in his ability to be an impactful player. And so if he gives me the sense that he would be willing to test free agency to see if there's someone that is willing to gamble on an impact player with an injury history. And that could be, I mean, look, that could be the Jets.
That's I put that up in the article. Like, yeah, the Jets are a team that can take that risk, right? Like they don't have Super Bowl expectations in 2025. Right. The Lions do.
Yeah. And so, the sense I've always got talking to Iffy is that he doesn't lack confidence, and he looks at the injuries more as just something that is instead of something that impedes him. Right. Whereas I think teams will look at it as, a speed bump, right? Like that's something that they have to worry about. Whereas in his mind, it's when I'm on the field, I produce, and I think I'm, still a starter level caliber player. And I don't know if he gets that opportunity in Detroit. At least not, I mean, he's not getting a starter level opportunity. Right. So, yeah, if he's a little tricky,
I think I'm with you though. I'm kind of leaning probably not a re-signing.
Yeah, I think he's going to test. That would be my guess.
Yep.
With Levi, I think Levi may test as well, and the only reason I say that is because we heard a report from Dave Burkett that they tried to re-sign him last offseason and he didn't, and so maybe it was because they were too low, or because of his injury history, or maybe he is potentially eyeing the market as well to test his value and see where he's at as well. So again, versatility. You just talked about that with Iffy. You see the same thing with Levi. It's a need for the Lions. I could see them pushing a little bit harder, especially with Levi playing all season and finding ways to be consistent.
Yep.
I could see them push a little harder for him. If they meet his number, I think they could bring him back, right? Yeah. That's the trick is with this injury history, what is it, right?
I don't know what he's going to be asking. I don't know what any team is going to be willing to pay because as several people have pointed out, that defensive tackle market ballooned last year. And is it going to stay that high? Is he going to earn double digits per year? That seems crazy to me.
It's wild because I saw a screenshot on Twitter of someone took a screenshot of a Levi projection, like what they thought he might make and where he might go. And I was like, oh, I don't know where that's from. So I started sleuthing and I Googled it and blah, blah, blah. And eventually I went down the rabbit hole a little bit of looking up people that were predicting what Levi might do. And he's gone from people predicting he would, go for like an $8 million a year season to now like a $14 million a year season.
And so, double that.
Right.
It's
and
wild.
So it is. And so I don't really know where he fits. Personally, I think he's probably closer to that 8 than he is to the 14 because of the injury history and like, there's value. And like you said, the market's gone up, but if they look at him and they're like, hey, we think you're worth 8 and he thinks he's worth 14, then he's going to test the market as well.
Yeah. With the other two, so John Kaminsky to me is like, I mean, sure, maybe bring him back on a cheap deal. We know he loves it here. We know he loves this coaching staff. So I think that could be an easier re-signing. Derek Barnes to me is maybe the more interesting one of the entire group. Let's point out one thing first. He now has a pretty big advocate as the new defensive coordinator, right? His position coach.
Sure.
I think they are very happy with everything, with all the steps that Derek Barnes has made in his career. And for as much as it sucked losing him during the season, it could play to their benefit in terms of the cost. And so I think he's close to that conversation we just had with the first question, where I think he might be one of those priority re-signings, and it might be one of their bigger offseason moves.
He picked a terrible time, or he unfortunately it's a terrible time for him to get injured, because this is a free agency linebacker class where he's probably not considered a top 10 free agent right now, which is kind of crazy.
Yep.
But because it's like out of sight, out of mind, the value goes down. And so if he's not a top 10 guy, we're talking about less than $5 million per year. 4 million if he's lucky, right? Like probably.
Yeah.
And so that has to be way under what he was looking for, because he was going into the season again. This is a prove it season for me. Like he said that over and over. Remember the scuffles he got in with Dan Skipper in practice, in training camp, like almost every day. He got like 3 or 4 of them or 6 of them or whatever it was. And we kept talking to him after those, and he was just like, I'm not messing around. This is a prove it season for me. This is important for me. Right. And he was gliding towards that. He was making plays. He was doing things the right way. And then that injury, it's so devastating for him. And so I do wonder if he resets for a 1 year and says, I want to prove it again instead of signing a multi-year, because if you're not in the top 10 and you're only getting 3 to 4 million a year, are you going to sign a multi-year deal with that? If you think it's under your value, or do you try and say, hey, let me get that year and try and prove it? And then if that's the case, is he going to be able to prove it in Detroit, or will he look for another opportunity where he gets something different? So it is a bit of an unknown. I think Detroit would like to bring him back. I think they'd like to bring him back on a multi-year deal, but right now his price point is pretty low.
Yeah. And I also think the Lions are one of those teams that are going to value him more than everyone else, because they know all those intangible things about him. They know the grit, they know the personality, and they know how they would use him, right? They have the Sam linebacker role that they'd love to use him in if that's what Kelvin wants to continue doing. It's not necessarily like if they don't bring him back, maybe they don't have the Sam role. Maybe they have something different. Maybe Kelvin has something completely different in mind. But given that we know how much aligned he was with Aaron Glenn, I would imagine the defense is going to look very similar to what it did last year. But Aaron Glenn was flexible too. All right, let's
one more. I just want to bring one more.
Yeah.
The Dorsey again. I think Dorsey fits into this list, being an injured. But I agree with you. I just want to reiterate that I think that they will work to re-sign him, because if of all of the guys, all the defenders that are injured, I think he's the one guy with a big enough injury that they would be willing to say, hey, let's re-sign him, get him back in, rehab him, and see if we can get him ready for the season.
All right, next question here comes from Z Gascan. 12 asks, with all the coaching changes going on and rumored hires coming out with no positions, how many coaches are allowed on staff, and is it possible different position groups get assistants going forward that didn't have them before to help groups in need? So we had a lot of questions like this because all these rumors that you are hearing, which are almost certainly true, they aren't coming with a position, as Gascan says. But I think what's important to note is that they probably, a lot of these probably do have positions, right? We don't know for sure.
Yeah. But the leak doesn't know who was leaked. The reporting person doesn't know what the position is.
Right. So I think a lot of people are like, why is Bruce Gradkowski an offensive assistant? Why is Tyler Roll the Iowa State / North Dakota State guy? Why is he just an offensive assistant? How many offensive assistants do we need? Especially when we have, David Shaw, a guy who's coached offense for years, Johnny Morton, a guy who's been coaching for 30 years. I think the answer is those guys are going to be coaching probably a specific position, whether Bruce Gadkowski is going to be the assistant quarterbacks coach to fill in JT Barrett's spot. Tyler Roll could be the new tight ends coach. He's coached tight ends before.
Correct.
So I think we kind of have to wait for the dust to settle when it comes to that. But yeah, like one of those guys just might be a general offensive assistant. Like a lot of times you'll see those guys cycle in and out, right? These guys that are either like, what's the internship? They have a different word for like an internship.
The minority internship, is that what you're talking about?
That's one of them. But I think there's also like just like I don't know. They have different assistant. Yes, they have different assistant roles.
Yes. Okay, so just to overview, there's no like specific limit on coaches as far as I understand.
Yeah.
I know that they can shift guys around. Every year they change the dynamics of how the coaching staff is organized. So they almost certainly will reorganize how the coaching staff was again. Just because they lost an assistant quarterbacks coach doesn't necessarily mean they're going to bring one in. Sure looks like they are, but they might not. They may say, oh, we want Gradkowski to shadow Shaw. So he'll just be, quote unquote, an offensive assistant, and he'll just shadow Shaw as a passing game coordinator or learn what that is. They can be general offensive assistants. They can have specific roles. Like there's a whole variety of things that they can do. And right now they're just adding guys to fill in. So could it be maybe they're altering Scotty Montgomery's approach and they want a running backs coach? Like who knows? Like there's a lot of different things. Exactly.
NFL running back.
And he was also very much a blocking kind of running back, like on that in that fullback. So that's why he kind of makes sense to coach fullbacks and tight ends and stuff like that. Like that's where most of his experience kind of lended itself. But they can do a variety of different things. So there's not like a set limit if there's not like a set specific role, like they have to fill this. They can do a variety of different things. Typically where you see multiple coaches, like a coach and an assistant, is when you have quantity, offensive line, wide receiver group. Like when you have multiple, like when you have like 3-4 times as many players as you would like a tight ends group, right?
Yep.
Like, so that's where you see the assistants, but they definitely put them where they're needed. And depending on where you think you are strong, and then guys will flex between position groups as well, where they'll learn multiple.
I think the long and short of it is don't get hung up on titles until they're official. And even when they are official, I'm just now remembering looking at the Lions coaching staff, Jim O'Neill, who we all understand is the safeties coach, his title is defensive assistant. So even though he isn't listed as the safeties coach, he is serving as the team safeties coach, but he's just listed as a defensive assistant. So when you see some of these Lions new hires being labeled as an offensive assistant, being able to defensive assistant, they might continue to have that label, but most likely they will be surrounded by a specific position group. All right. Next question, kind of along the lines of that, from Brennan, asked, any thoughts on when the Lions will officially announce their coaching staff / changes? I figured they would have their coaching staff in place for the combine to interview players. Now, Erik, I know you keep a pretty rigid offseason schedule, so I looked this one up, so I know the answer to it. But so last year they announced it the week before the combine, so next week.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think
next
what's
week
important to remember is like there's still a lot of shifting going on, right? The Saints have an entire coaching staff they need to fill out now that Kellen Moore has finally been agreed to terms with.
Right.
So while it seems like this is late in the process, I think every team kind of is still putting their finishing touches on their coaching staff. The Eagles are obviously going to have to do a whole hunt too.
Anytime you have a major collective event where you have 32 teams represented, there's an opportunity to network, and there are coaches that go to these events that don't have jobs looking to like do short interviews and see if people are interested in. So Senior Bowl is one of the most prominent that you see a lot of moves come out of that coaching, out of that Senior Bowl. because you have college coaches and
When the
all
Lions were
kinds of
coaching
variety of
that,
things.
they were doing interviews while at the Senior Bowl.
Correct. And so the combine, the NFL has been making a push to try and slow the coaching hiring process down. And so I do think it's very possible some teams will be going into the combine even looking for little coaches to fill in little spots on their coaching roster as well. So um, yeah, I don't think they're in any rush
No,
to get it done.
but at the same time, probably expect most positions to be in place by next week. Could be as early as this week.
Yeah.
I know that the Lions wanted to give everyone some time off after the season, like 2-3 weeks, like the coaching staff and all that sort of stuff. And that doesn't mean they weren't doing anything. It doesn't mean that Brad and Dan weren't still in the building preparing for all these coaching changes and things like that. It's just the operation might not run as fast. I mean, like, one thing too is they might have their entire coaching staff already hired. Like, they're just waiting. Like,
yeah,
like let's have the PR team have another week off and have them come in ready and healthy to go and all that. Like,
100%.
Yeah, there's no hurry. There's no mandatory list of when you have to get everything filled in by. So that might be where we stand.
Yeah, typically, like I said, I think they've done it in the past before the combine just because of media availability, and media is going to have questions for them, and they're going to be asking, hey, Dan, like, what are you going to do with this? Like, or tell me about your new coach. Like, and so they do that as kind of but by no means are they going to rush it for anybody.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we just got done talking about a lot of their internal decisions. We're going to kind of spread things out to the external, talk a little bit about free agency, talk a little bit about the draft, and more of your Lions questions when we come back here on the Midweek Mailbag. We'll be right back. Okay. We're in break here.
I didn't notice this, but Nolan tweeted this out that Cameron Davis, the Lions assistant D-line coach, that they separated. He ended up in with Glenn. Yeah, I didn't know that. I was wondering where he would go, but that makes sense.
Was that like, hey, we knew you were going to go? Is he the assistant D-line coach, or is he going to be the D-line coach?
Yep. Nope, assistant. Okay. He probably wanted to interview, and they were probably like, yeah, go ahead. You know. Or maybe it was just put in place and they were like, hey, we got a new DL coach. Let's go ahead. We'll let you go. No problem. Right. Like they're not against it's not uncommon for them to let coaches go for lateral moves. They did it with Deuce. Yeah. Remember? Like they were like, all right, Deuce, you want to be closer to home? Good luck,
won't stand people. I mean, that's one thing Dan Campbell has made clear is like, we're not going to stand in our coach's way to do what they want. And that doesn't mean they won't block an interview here or there. I don't know if they have blocked an interview since they've been here.
I don't know.
But, you know, they'll fight to keep guys that they really like, right? I'm certain they fought maybe 2 straight off seasons to keep Hank.
Oh, yeah, I would think so.
They fought to keep Ben Johnson last year. They gave him a big raise. So, and I like that about them. You know, maybe it makes their job a little bit harder.
Sure.
Letting people walk like that, but at the same time, they have a lot of confidence in themselves, and at this point, Lions fans should have a lot of confidence in them too. And plus, when you're allowing coaches to do that, that's the kind of work environment that I think people want to be a part of, right?
Certainly.
It was interesting when doing research for their new offensive assistant, the Iowa State guy. I haven't memorized his name yet.
Oh, jeez.
But
I'm blanking on it right now.
I should.
There's an OE in there.
Yeah, Tyler Roll.
There you go.
What was interesting is that last year he took a job to be Middle Tennessee. Is that right?
Tennessee State.
Under Eddie George. Yep. And someone wrote this like whole thing about how those two have been like circling each other's orbit for a while and been talking to each other, and they like themselves so much, and like they were 2 peas in a pod. And then like a month later, he decided to take a different job. I'm like, what? I'd love to know the background behind that, because part of it too was like he had been at North Dakota State for 10 years. He played ball at North Dakota State, and I think he even said like it was going to take a really good opportunity for me to leave North Dakota State, and so being with Eddie George was that opportunity. And then a month later, he's like, "Oh, a D5 school is calling. See you later."
Right. That's kind of what it is. Like, I'm sure. Look, I know money isn't always a driving force, but I'm sure the money was better at Iowa State than it was at Tennessee State as well.
Yeah.
And so this is a guy with a young family that probably was like,
he parlayed that into an NFL job. If his,
which is going to be more money as well.
Right. If that was his goal, was to eventually like find an opportunity that he can parlay into something even bigger, he made the right choice. It's just interesting to see a guy that's like, I love North Dakota State. It's where I want to be.
He played there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just like jump. That's a lot of jumps. And I mean, literally in a calendar year, 365 days ish,
4 jobs.
3 different jobs. Yeah. He took 3 new jobs, 4 total different jobs.
Yeah. He's in demand though. That's what I was trying to take out of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
People want him to be on their staff.
All right, let me get through some alerts, and then we'll take on some of these live questions from people on our YouTube and our Twitch chats. See some coming in, and we'll get to them as many as possible while we're on break here. Big J Shaky, thank you for the sub 19 hours ago. So you must have done it while we were on, while we weren't live. So appreciate you. I don't know if you're here in the chat. Why are you a first time subscriber? Is that true?
No.
I reckon.
Me?
No, Big J Shaky.
Oh. No, can't be. He's been around forever.
I recognize him from the website all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like he's in the chat too, but it says first timer. Anyways, either way, Brett Whitefield, 14 straight months subscribed to the channel, says yeah. That reminds me of the really annoying American Express commercial with what's her name?
Yeah,
this actress that has older.
Ben Affleck's ex-wife. I'm blanking on her name. She was Dared.
No.
She was not Dared. She was what?
No,
Electra?
the White Lotus lady.
Blanking on her name.
No. Where she's at the salon with someone and she's like, "Let me pay for this."
Yeah. Stifler's mom. Stifler's mom.
Stifler's mom.
That's where she's more well known for that.
Yeah. At the end, and I'm just like, please stop doing this. I know she's having her moment right now, and I love it when an older actress gets like her moment in the sunshine well after, what Hollywood deems is their prime. Jennifer Gardner?
Jennifer Gardner. Thank you.
Garner.
Yeah. Garner.
Jennifer Coolidge. No, you're thinking Jennifer Gardner. I'm thinking Jennifer Coolidge.
I was.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Tara. That's driving me crazy. But anyways.
Her best roles were like Best in Show and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. When the Christopher Guest movies.
Yep.
She was also great in Pootie Tang. Which remains one of the most ridiculous and funny movies. D-Lines for Life, thank you for the 13 months on Twitch, says thanks for all the great content, gents. Appreciate you. Zosian, thank you for the follow. Erik with a K, also 7 months subscribed to the channel. Romero von Frankenstein, 13 months subscribed to the channel. Stephanie, thank you for the follow. Nick the Greek, 100 bits, says, what kind of kickback is Harper getting on these Girl Scout cookie orders? I'm about to have to re-up.
You know what happens with the Girl Scout cookies is that you have to sell a certain amount in order to like they're doing like they do like camping trips and summer trips and stuff like that. And then this one's for a Mackinac trip. And so the money that they get goes towards their trip, and then certain money goes towards troops and all this stuff, right? But if she sells more online, then she doesn't have to do the cookie booth outside of like the grocery store, right? Because you're hoping to meet a certain quota. Yeah. And so if you buy cookies from her, then I don't have to sit outside in 20-degree weather with Harper trying to hawk Girl Scout cookies to people that are coming out of a grocery store with loads and loads of expensive food. So it allows me to stay at home and work on more line stuff. So that's what you're really doing.
If you want your Erik draft board, quicker than buy some of his child's cookies.
She's hit her quota and exceeded it. Like
Oh.
when which is nice. She usually hits around like 250 boxes or something like that. It's usually like a good total. And so we were late to it this year. And so we were like, oh, we'll do it at 200. And she's like, no, 300. And I'm like, I don't know. And then we're like, yeah, she was right. So
I'll be honest, I bought some from you guys last year. I did not buy any from you this year. And I explained to you why. And the reasoning why is because I, like 3 weeks ago, I threw out the last amount of cookies I had from last year because
terrible.
I don't know. It's not that I don't. I like Girl Scout cookies. I just
yesterday picked up the hand deliver orders. Like the people that ordered on for delivery, they've gotten their cookies. But the people that want the hand delivered, I just picked up. I think there's 14 cases of cookies in my garage right now. Don't come steal them out of my garage, please. But yeah, I got to separate those and start passing those out to the people that live close to me.
Not that obvious. Thank you for the 18-month subscribe to the channel. 14 bits from Nick the Greek says Erik Schlitt is the Prop Joe of Girl Scout cookie distribution game, which is, I believe, a reference to The Wire.
Oh,
Prop Joe.
I don't remember that part.
I'm like 90% sure. It's been a while since I've seen The Wire.
Nick's got a lot of good references. I get 99% of them.
Can we talk about Kendrick Lamar? I think two aging white guys is probably not the audience to discuss that halftime show.
I saw a video of an older white lady that said something like "my poor husband," and it was like scenes of her following, like with being in different rooms and then being like, "Did you know that this was representing this? Did you know that they're suing each other?" And I was like, "That's kind of what's happening here." Like I'm like. It's like she's learning all this information and then telling her husband all this, and I'm like, that's kind of like where I'm at. I'm learning all of this information as we go. I cannot speak to it. I do find the information that I am learning hilarious.
Yep.
But I am by no means someone who could, like, if Ryan was on this podcast, Ryan could have explained everything.
And he did.
Ryan
he talked plenty about it on the actual PODcast, so you can go back and watch that from Monday.
I just am not
right.
We're the wrong people. Think it's funny. But I know general stuff, and I'm learning all the time. Every time a new video,
I think the perfect explanation of why I'm the wrong person to talk about that halftime show is when they showed Serena Williams and she was crip walking. I was like,
I thought that was funny.
I'm like, that's cool. I know that. I know that reference.
I know who she is.
I know. Like, I watch tennis. I play tennis. A very white people sport, generally speaking. And I know that. I think it was either the Olympics or Wimbledon. She crip walked, and it was like a huge controversy because they're like,
yes,
oh my god, she's doing gang things, like, which is also in retrospect very funny,
ridiculous.
So I'm like, oh, that's a fun reference to that moment in American culture. Absolutely no idea that she was Drake's ex. That I had no idea.
No, this is as far as I know. I went, oh, that's Serena Williams. I thought nothing of it.
Right.
That was the extent. I knew nothing of everything else you just pointed out. Right. I mean, I knew that after the fact, but ahead of time, no. I was like, oh, I know her. That's about it. Very funny. Like, I know there's a bunch of people that are like getting upset, like, oh, it was bad, or like
worst halftime show ever.
But there's also a lot of people that like, look, it's the most watched halftime show ever. And if you are in a battle of pettiness and you have an opportunity to establish your pettiness at a level that is unparalleled, like, you win. Like the game, you love that. You're done. Like, no one else can do what you just did. You win. So if you wanted to pay to perform in the Super Bowl to do that, good job. you win the petty war, and you get my respect for that because I definitely love the pettiness.
Yeah. All right. Let's answer some of these Lions related questions before they all get scrolled out of my reach here.
Yes.
Really quick, I believe it's Dave Burkett. You said Burkett.
Oh, I said Burkett. I don't know why I said that.
Yeah.
I caught myself.
Yeah. But anyways, Za'Darius Smith, we have a keeper cut. Where do you fall on that right now?
If he doesn't restructure, he's cut. That's my guess.
I think you're probably right, but I also would not be surprised if they just leave it.
Ooh, it's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money
for a guy who may not be a starter.
It's spread over 2 years. It gives you depth that you can relatively trust, which they need, whether that's a starter or not. We know that Brad Holmes does not love to go into the draft with a glaring need.
Sure.
And I haven't looked at the free agency list, but I have to imagine, like most years, there aren't a lot of starting capable guys out there that aren't 35 or older just waiting in free agency for you. Like, yes, you'll have Khalil Mack. Yes, you'll have Calais Campbell. But are that
Josh Sweat?
Josh Sweat?
Ooh, get Josh Sweat. That's copy the Eagles to a T right there.
Right.
But
Milton Williams, I think, is also available. I know he's maybe more
but he's
interior guy. But
you remember how upset they were when they couldn't get Alim and they ended up with him, and I was like, but they were.
You think
they
keep
were unhappy,
him?
But I don't know. I haven't looked at their cap situation to see what that works.
Za'Darius is a tough one for me.
It goes off quick. It goes off I don't see Reddick, Kuntz from Vegas. Then you're getting like Baron Browning when you're talking about 1-year deals.
Yeah.
Chase Young. No. Ojulari. Like everybody was interested in trading for Ojulari. But DeMarcus Lawrence. But again, you said you don't want 30-plus-year-olds. Dante Fowler. Yeah. Don't really like him. I mean, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Everybody like Za'Darius might be the best option, even if you're paying $11 million over 2 years.
You got a couple interesting guys like Judon, Uche. I don't know about Derek Barnett. I mean, he's still young, but the connection's lost now that you have a new DL coach. I don't know. I mean, like Za'Darius is okay. I'm not disagreeing with that. I think he fits.
Yep.
I just don't think he's going to. I don't think he's worth that amount of money. And knowing Brad Holmes's history, he's going to say, "This is where we think your value is."
What about the
renegotiate?
What if they add another year? What if they just do that?
Well, that's a renegotiation, right? Like if you want to renegotiate and you want to
I just think the way we've framed this discussion is pay cut or cut. Those aren't the only two options, right? Like you can.
No, but that's what I
add a year.
I think they'd have to add a year and meet in the middle. Like they'd have to say, we think you're worth 7. You think you're worth 11. We'll give you 8.5. You know what I mean? Like or something ridiculous, something silly like that. Like, but yeah, if they don't touch a contract, I don't see them keeping it. I'm pretty confident about that.
I'm just like thinking though, like let's throw a $4 million salary onto 2026, and that's it. Like,
again, it's not that they can't afford it. Right. It's that I've watched them go to players and say,
"Sure,
you're not worth this money. We want you to reduce it," and that's fully what I expect them to do with Za'Darius. We don't think you're worth 11. We think you're worth this. So let's try and renegotiate. Oh, you don't want to? All right. Sorry. That's my guess. Is based on what they've done in the past.
But like to me, almost adding $4 million is almost costing you less because it's right now it's 11 spread over 2 years. You're only getting him for 1 year, and it's 11 million spread over 2 years. If you add like a $4 million salary to 2026, which is one of the 3 void years on his deal, suddenly it's 15 million for 2 years spread over 3 years. And that sounds better to me. 15 million spread over 3 years in terms of cap hit for 2 years of Za'Darius Smith versus 1 year, $11 million spread over 2 years. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
No, I understand what you're saying. What I'm wondering is, do they think he's worth $7.5 million? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what
right.
the actual
Correct.
value of the deal.
Yes.
And so that's what I'm not sure about.
Right. And you might have to make that $4 million guaranteed. Otherwise, there's no incentive for him to agree to that. You're just adding you're potentially just adding phony money to that contract. If it's just like a $4 million salary, like,
yeah,
I don't know if he thinks if that's enough for him. That's just, I threw a number out there.
Again, if you kind of look at what the projected costs are, like, where does he value himself? Does he think he's a top 50 free agent at 31 or whatever? Like, if you do, then maybe that's what your price is. Yeah. But if he's not a top 100, is he on the top 100? Like, is he on PFF's top 100? Like, I don't think he is. No, I think it's just. I'll just look up the Lions real fast.
Let me scroll back down here while you do that.
No, they have Carlton, Zeitler, Levi. Those are the only 3 Lions that they have on their top 100. So if you take that for what it is.
With good deal and edge this year, would Kelvin shake it up like Jason's question? Oh, you're referencing other questions? Oh boy. I don't know where that one is.
Excuse me.
Am I missing it? Do you have favorite edge players in the draft? Is that one of the questions that I took? I can't remember.
In this draft?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just make sure that's not one of the questions that I took down. No, I didn't. Do you have, because someone asked if we can, let's tie these two together. Yeah,
okay. Because someone asked about defensive tackles, I thought too.
1,000,000% on you here. There is a question about defensive tackle versus edge that we will take, but this is more specific to this particular draft. One, who are your favorite? Two, so I think someone asked on Twitter and I didn't take it. Is there anyone that you would be willing to trade up to get at edge?
The trick is, what kind of guy are you looking for? Because there's a variety of them, right? Yeah. If you're looking for a bigger bodied guy, you're not probably trading up for anybody. I think you're going to have some options of guys that are going to be that kind of bigger edge that you can get at in the later parts of the first round, or maybe even in the second round. There's some bigger body guys in the second round as well. If you're looking for more of like a pure pass rusher that can give you more bend, more aggressiveness, more flexibility, maybe some positional movement, there are guys you're going to have to maybe trade up for to get that. If you're looking for a guy who is that you want some flexibility with, but you want them to be more of a run stuffer than a pass rusher, again, I think you can kind of wait and you're going to have some options of those. This class with the edge rushers, and I said this to you yesterday, you might see between defensive line and edge, a third of the top 100 picks all fall into that defensive line group.
That's wild.
And we're talking like 30 players all coming from defensive tackle or edge. Like, it's a crazy deep class the more I dig into it. And so, excuse me, there's going to be like some options. Now, if you trade up, it's hard because I'm still kind of sorting through. So it's hard for me to say, would you have to trade up for a guy? Like we talked about in the past, Abdul Carter is the guy he's going to top 5. Could be the best player in this class. Like he's going to be a guy that's probably unreachable. But after him, these guys could I could see any of them going in the top 10 or also there's like another 5 guys that I could see going top 10 range or maybe sliding down into like near 20. And if they're near 20, then yeah, you could going up and trying to make a move on the next like 5 guys. Like that makes a lot of sense. Georgia has 2 really good edge players. Jalen Walker, they played him more off ball, but he's a better pass rusher. He's your prototypical Sam that you would play in that you'd probably want to increase your Sam usage. You're going to want to, you could change the way you use guys, but he's a guy like you could play in kind of like a elevated James Houston and Derek Barnes combined to make what he can do because he can do both roles. Then Micah Williams on the other side, he is almost exactly like what you had in Marcus Davenport. So if you're like, hey, I want to run back that Davenport, the guy that can play down, that can stand up and maybe drop once in a while into like his own, you can get that out of Williams, but he's probably going, like in the middle of the first round. And so if you want Marcus Davenport, but without the injury history and you want upside, yeah, trade up, go get him. Like you could do that. But so I don't think there's necessarily like a guy that I can point to and be like, yeah, this is the guy to go get because they're all unique there's a lot of variance in the style of guy. And I don't know exactly what style of guy they're looking for, but there should be options to do a variety of different things, move up, stick, even get a guy in the second round. There's like 12 or 14 different edge rushers that I think are all first or second round guys potentially. So it's kind of, it's a fun class with a lot of variety.
Right. Keeping on edge, Philip Thomas over on YouTube says Sports Illustrated talked Marcus Davenport 1 year, $5.5 million. Sorry. Would you guys do that instead? No.
Like if it was a total contract where you hit all your bonuses and you start instituting game bonuses and stuff like that, maybe, but it would have to be like heavily game incentive.
Yeah. His last contract, this past one, was 1 year, $6.5 million.
Right.
And now he's going to be entering age 29 season, coming off multiple years now with I don't think he is in a position to be asking for that much money at all. Like if he gets more than 3 or 4 million, I'd be surprised.
He could I could see him get like a 1.5 base and then just like game check galore.
Per game bonuses. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Per game bonuses, sack bonuses,
which the Lions did give him. That's part of what his contract was.
They had roster bonuses. They had a whole bunch of stuff like that. Yeah, which is why I bet when they do the adjustments that they do at the end of the season, they probably will have overpaid for him, and they might get some credits back.
Yeah,
I would think.
I don't know net if they're going to get a lot back, but with
no, I don't know about that either. I haven't really looked that deep at it, but
but no, I mean. If the choices are keep Za'Darius Smith at his contract or sign Marcus Davenport for 1 year, $5.5 million, and cut Za'Darius Smith, I'm keeping Za'Darius Smith, and it's not close.
We're not in a bubble, so you could cut them both and start again, or you could retain them both and see if the combination of the two of them are worth it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But now you're starting to rely on 29 and 31-year-old edge rushers, and you're counting on them to stay healthy and impactful, and then rotate aside. I don't know.
JT Sam 25-bit says, I just saw a tweet from Brett Coleman this season about how getting power guys on edge and speed guys in the interior is a good strategy. I think I was referring to the Rams draft picks. What do you think about this strategy? Is it viable in today's NFL?
Say that one more. Can you take that first part and I'll catch up? I got a DM I was trying to answer.
Yeah. Sorry. No, it's basically Brett Coleman propose that maybe the good strategy for your defensive front is power guys on the edge, speed guys on the interior. Is that a viable strategy in today's NFL?
I think it depends on the scheme, right? Like it depends on what your goal is.
Right.
For some teams, that's going to work. For other teams, it's not. Like we've talked about in the past, um, it's all about trying to counter and get ahead of what the offense is going to do, right? Offense spreads it out. You end up going lighter up front and heavier in the back. Then the offense starts running it. And so now you want to get a little bit bulkier up front,
Right.
but now you're changing it. Now you want that bulk spread out. And then the interior. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. There's going to be some teams that absolutely agree with that, and some teams that are like, no, we have to be bigger. And
the Lions are kind of like halfway there, right? Like they definitely want their edges big and bulky and strong. Like they want speed to power or just power. Interior, I don't know if they want quick guys, but they're not averse to it. Like there's still a run first mindset. And so they're going to want a nose tackle who is just going to be there plugging and
right.
taking on 2 double teams if he can. But at the same time, Alim's got some wiggle to him. They call him Twinkle Toes for a reason, right?
Right.
So he has the, for lack of a better term, girth, but he also has speed, short area speed.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that the Lions agree with that whole philosophy to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to get a bunch of undersized guys to play in the interior.
The thing with the Lions specifically is that they want their front to be flexible to adapt to their opponent. And so there's no they don't want to go in and be like, this is what our defense is. This is blah, blah, we're going to play speed inside, power outside all the time. Because it's not always going to work against every opponent. You're going to need that flexibility. And so they tend to try and go after guys that allow them to be flexible. And maybe we're a little heavier interior this week. Maybe we're a little heavier on the edges this week. They want that flexibility more than they want like a specific guy in a spot.
Along these lines, Damian Smith donated £5 on YouTube, says, do you think Casey Rogers will tweak the front a bit? Wondering if we could see a speed rusher and less of a crush the can opposite Aiden.
I do think that Casey Rogers coming in is what could potentially change the front a little bit. I think with Shepard's exposure to multiple styles of front under Aaron Glenn, plus Rogers also has experience running different 4-man fronts. I think that leaves the Lions open to altering it. I know there's more people that think things are going to stay the same than me, but I definitely think there is an element. The key here is that Aiden can do it all. Right. Because Aiden can stand up and rush off the edge, because Aiden can rush from his hand in the dirt, because he can do all those things. And because Alim can move between different spots, you can change the front and still highlight your feature stars.
Yeah.
And so will they switch to like a full Tampa where they're having like 2 blocks in the middle and then like your edge guys are standing up and most of the time they're rushing, but sometimes they drop because you're blitzing linebacker? They could do that as well because I think they have the personnel, but I don't know if that's going to be, I don't know if they're going to full switch over to Tampa style necessarily, but they have the bodies to change things up, and they can maybe that's just different sets they work in, you know what I mean, as opposed to a base. But I do think Rogers' presence creates some unique opportunities. I want to point out he was the D-line coach with the Giants when the Giants just ran, 4. They just rushed 4 and they just ran a traditional 4-3. Like, it's not like Rodgers is going to push for one style. He's coached multiple styles of fronts, but I think it gives them options to be creative.
I agree with you there. And in terms of schematics, I do think that it would be foolish for us to assume anything about what they're going to do. Philosophically, though, when it comes to speedy edge rushers versus crush the can, I think they're pretty married to crushing the can.
Yes.
I think Dan Campbell has said it over and over and over again that that's how you win in today's NFL. And that's how you win against these mobile quarterbacks. I know that seems counterintuitive. Why would you want these power guys chasing a quarterback around that's much faster and more athletic than them? Don't you want a speed rusher? Speed rushers get themselves into trouble. If you are running out wide and trying to beat your guy out wide, that is opening a wide open rushing lane. And that is that's the whole thing that everyone's concerned about. The Eagles, they didn't win by winning the edge. They did not make Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable by running around the edge. They crushed the can from each position, from the edge, from the interior. They made it so Patrick Mahomes had nowhere to go. You saw when he was trying to scramble, he'd have to keep reversing direction because there was nowhere for him to go. And so I don't think that's going away. They might like certain body types that are different this time around, but I think their philosophy when it comes to pass rushing, particularly against mobile quarterbacks, is going to continue to be crush the can.
So when we think about what they did and what their kind of preference was last year, it was much different at the beginning of the year than it was at the end of the year because they had to adjust to losing bodies, right? Beginning of the year, Aiden was rushing on one side when the Sam wasn't on the field. And then when the Sam was on the field, he was on a different side, right? And so because you had different philosophies on how you wanted to bring pressure. And so when the Sam was on the field, you had a bigger bodied end to hold that gap to allow that speed rush.
Yep.
And then when the Sam wasn't there, then you wanted like a Davenport, a guy that could match Aiden's unpredictability, but also ability to both stop the run and pass rush. And so, again, if they can add a guy like a Davenport, then you can run it back and you can still use that Sam. Yep. But if you're not going to get that guy, then there needs to be then you're starting to change the front. And that's really what I don't know is, can they get a guy like Davenport? Because with Za'Darius, he gives you part of that role. Like he gives that, he could give them both run stop and pass rush, but he didn't give you like an elite pass rush. So it's really depends on, that's why I say they could go so many different routes because they can change what they want to do. And I think in an ideal world, they're adding a guy like Davenport. Like if a guy like I said, Michael Williams from Georgia, if all of a sudden he's there at like 16 and you're like, how much it cost to move up 12 spots, because he could be a different kind of, he can do things in a different way than some of the other edge guys can. And so, or are you like, hey, let's bring back Za'Darius and then add a guy like Mike Green, who is more of a pure pass rusher, but also has some run stuffing chops, but you're drafting him because he's more of a pure guy. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. We'll learn more once they start adding guys in free agency. We're going to learn a lot more about the type of edge guys they're looking at.
Right. And hopefully during the combine, we get to talk to some of the new coaches and understand why they think they were brought in, what they bring to the table. Hopefully we'll hear from Dan about what he thinks about the new hires. And
maybe Shep will go, we're 3-4. Let's go. We're doing a 3-4.
I don't think
this is it. Aiden standing up, 3 bodies,
That'd be nice.
We're drafting defensive tackles in the first 2 rounds. I don't know. Maybe he will.
Who knows? Whole different coach now. King Prime, thank you for the 4-month subscribe to us on Twitch. What's your out today? 11:30?
Yeah.
11? 11:30?
11:30.
Okay. So we're not in a hurry yet. So if you guys have some more questions, we can continue to answer them. Try to scroll up and see if there's... Oh, is the Detroit Lions Breakdown podcast still available? That's a good question.
Yes. So the outlet that we were using to publish the podcast did an update like a month before the season ended. And when they did an update, it just messed up a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes on us. And that's why it was like sporadically producing stuff, which is also why we just put stuff on the website. We tried to work with them for like weeks, and eventually we're like, it's not, they're blaming our host. The host is blaming the producer. Like, so we eventually were like, you know what? We're just cutting everything and we're just going to start fresh here. So we got a new company, and that company is then spent a week or so trying to undo all of the problems that the original update did behind. And so that happened. Then Joe got sick and Joe got a cold, and he's been under the weather the last 2 weeks. And so it just happens that it happened to hit him on a Thursday. So we think we have the stuff fixed, and like, we don't know for certain because we haven't put a show out, but Joe's on the mend. And so we should be getting back into a groove soon. Yeah. But for whatever reason, it just, honestly, I regret hitting that update button. When I hit that update button, and it would spend 2 months of ridiculousness.
Headaches. Yeah.
And yes. And it's not like these guys are fixing the other person's problems for free either. We're just, it's frustrating. So no, it's not gone. It is still there. We're just working around problems.
I'm just going to also throw this out here for questions that we're taking. If your question is, what do you think about this draft prospect? Probably not going to take it for 2 reasons. One, I've done 0 draft research. And when I say 0, I mean literally 0. I'm going to start very soon, particularly because I'm going to be down at the NFL Combine, and I'd like to at least have a baseline for this draft class by then. And I know Erik is still relatively early in his draft. Mm-hmm. Like, he's usually 2 months deep. He's probably like 3 weeks deep.
Right. I have my board, by the way, for those who are looking. It's basically the initial install is built.
Right.
I'm waiting on the combine list.
Yeah.
Once I get the combine list, I'm going to put that out there for all the Patreon subscribers and people that are looking for it. It's almost there. And yes, I'm catching up as fast as I can.
The other reason I don't want to take those type of questions is because we could just get a million of them, and it's just us talking about individual prospects for 5-6 minutes, and I don't find that to be particularly engaging content when we're just talking about one guy. I'd rather talk about bigger picture questions and things like that. Now, once we're closer to the draft, if you want to take some of those questions during our breaks, I think we can do that. But I'm not that eager to jump in on, hey, let's talk about this guy for the next 7 minutes when there's 250 some guys that are going to get drafted.
We're going to find our favorites. And we're going to be chatting about them all the time.
Or to put in a very sarcastic way, Nick the Greek with 100 bits says, I have 7 different obscure draft prospects that I need your informed takes on. I also have 5 different Myles Garrett trade scenarios that I think need to make it on the podcast. I included my own thoughts and your takes for you to read out loud as well. Let me know where to send these 2,800 words of text. That is a very cynical way of explaining my point.
You want to take the next? I see there's a couple more.
Which one?
Any. Just go down the list. What's there was, what was the next one? OL?
Free agent OL?
OL. I feel pretty confident they're going to bring Zeitler back. So I haven't really looked at any of the OL.
Yeah.
But just looking at guards, like Trey Smith's going to be, he's going to reset the market, right? With his contract.
Yeah.
Will Freeze, I expect him to get re-signed. I don't know, Tevin Jenkins, and then Zeitler, according to PFF. So like, I don't necessarily like Tevin Jenkins more than I like Zeitler, specifically for what the Lions like to do. I like Scherf, but I mean, if with you already have Zeitler. Like if you miss on Zeitler, could you talk me into it? Sure. Could you, if you miss on Zeitler, could you talk me into going and getting like Mekhi Becton, who the Eagles right guard?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could talk me into that because he played well at right guard. You know, like he's done well in that power right guard type role. So like, I want to start with Zeitler. I want to see what I think, and if Zeitler isn't there, I'm interested. Sheriff's interesting. James Daniels is interesting to me because he's guard center. But I don't know. Is Zach Martin really going to hit free agency and play at 35 or whatever he is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that brings to maybe a more interesting philosophical question too. Like, if you are plugging that hole in free agency and it's not Zeitler, would you prefer to go with a Mekhi Becton who's only 26-ish, or do you go just like another Kevin Zeitler 1-year plug?
I think Zeitler fits so well with what they want to do that you try and bring him back. And if that means Mahogany battles Graham for left guard, great.
Yeah.
And if Mahogany wins that job and he plays left guard and then Zeitler retires, could Mahogany then switch to right and do? Yeah, he can play that role. Like I think Mahogany was drafted to play that role, but I also think Mahogany's flexible enough that you saw him play left side as well. So Zeitler played at a very high level, in my opinion, and I think he's worth retaining for another year, even if the plan was, hey, let's bring him in for a year and see if he can, we think Mahogany might be able to challenge for a starting role. Well, great. Let him challenge for a starting role on both sides. Yeah. Bring Zeitler back. He's still playing at a good level. You can still get him cheap. I like Becton, but I mean, he's a guy who played college tackle, didn't fit real well at tackle. Comes to Philly. Philly's got a great OL coach, great surrounding cast, just like the Lions do, and he had a good season. But like, is he going to be like? Could he be that guy? I don't know. I mean, can he be that guy consistently? I don't know. The potential's there. I mean, he was drafted. Wasn't he drafted like 4th overall or something ridiculous? Oh, 11th. Like he was drafted high for. I mean, he was drafted high for a reason. Like he was a top pick. Like because the talent is there. It never really worked for him as a tackle. And then once he got to Philly, he had a great season this year. So I'd be interested, but I think Zeitler's just too perfect for what they're looking to do at right guard.
This is kind of an interesting question as we inch into draft season. Krolik asked, who do you think is the most accurate person who ranks all of the prospects?
Okay, so I have different guys that I like for different spots, and there's some analysts that I like for specific roles. Like, for example, if it's offensive line, I tend to lean towards Brandon Thorne a lot. Right. But if you're talking overall, I think Dane Brugler is the GOAT. Yeah, I think he is. Everything starts at him. After him, there's other guys that I like. I like what Zierlein does. Zierlein's dad used to be an NFL O-line coach, so he's got some history with O-line. I tend to look at him at his evaluations of offensive linemen as well. But I think you kind of find guys like that do well in different spots, like Thorne. But if you're just looking for one guy, it's Brugler. Like, what Brugler does is worth the price of The Athletic alone, just for Brugler, right? And then you get Colton and Nick and all like The Athletic is more than worth the price for the amount of stuff that they do. But yes, the Beast by itself is probably worth the price of The Athletic.
It's such an impressive piece of work that he puts out.
It is. It's amazing. So yes, Brugler is the gold standard, but there are specific guys that you can look at and be like, he's done really well with like predicting this position.
Right.
And you might look at different guys for that.
All right, let me get to a couple more alerts here. Nick the Greek. Another 100 bit says, hold on, you guys don't understand. I spent a lot of time on these questions. I'm a bigger fan than everyone else on here. Also, I am a better person with a bigger heart. I am entitled to your focus and attention.
He is going to if he takes that pro bono lawsuit of mine, then you know
who called themselves? Who was it? I don't even remember who it was.
That's Chrysler's. That's his name. That's his nickname too. He has the same nickname.
Who?
So Bert Chrysler or whatever his name.
Bert Kreischer.
Yeah.
Kreischer. I don't think it's Chrysler.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to get the water out of my mouth here.
There you go.
Kreischer.
Colorado Lions. They give it 4 months. Says late to the show. How much better is the Lions defense than the end of the season if they add free agents? If they add free agents, Hutch, Wingo, Malcolm, Ennis. Okay. How much better will the Lions defense be next year than it was at the end of the season if they add free agents plus Hutch, Wingo, Malcolm, Ennis, and Alim?
So, look, if you look back at how they produced in the first half of the season, or even, like...
Did you see my tweet yesterday?
Well, I imagine it's like a night and day type tweet, right?
Yes. Lions defense,
like,
really quick. From weeks 1 to 13, the Lions were second in points per game, second in DVOA, first in EPA. From weeks 14 to 18, so the last 5 games of the regular season, I didn't include playoffs because I couldn't get the stats for playoffs for all those. 28th in points per game, 27th in DVOA, 30th in EPA. So from top 2 to bottom 6.
Is week 13 when Alim went down?
I think week 14 was when Alim, Carlton, and one other guy went down.
Dorsey.
And so it certainly seems that was a tipping point. Now there are other things that are involved in there, like that final stretch of 5 games in the regular season were also against some really good offenses. You had Green Bay in there, you had 49ers in there, you had Bills in there. That was that Bills game tipped the scales a lot with some of those numbers.
Yeah.
But still, a stat like DVOA takes into account offensive strength that you're facing, and the fact that was still 28th pretty much says everything. So
it's interesting because Aiden was dominating by himself almost the first 5 or 6 weeks. And then when Aiden went down, that's when everyone else started to come alive, right? If they come alive when Aiden is also a lot, producing at his level, like they would have been the best team in the league.
Yeah. I said this on the podcast on Monday, like, I think one of the things we were robbed from last year was we got Terrion Arnold playing like a rookie for the first half of the season when the pass rush was there. And then the pass rush wasn't there, and Terrion started playing better. So, like, what does that look like? Terrion playing pretty well with a good pass rush. Like, then you're starting to see the interceptions come, the pass breakups come, because, you know, quarterbacks are forcing throws.
Branch was in a new role in the first start, right? It was a lot of interesting things where they were still kind of figuring it out right off the bat. And then Aiden was basically just carrying the team.
Yeah.
And then everyone else was like, "Uh-oh, time to play." After that, Alim was huge. Losing Alim was as impactful as losing Aiden.
Yeah,
and actually, at the point where it happened, more impactful because they had, they didn't have anything else in the cupboard.
Another loss.
Right.
It's why, like, if you're a Pride of Detroit Direct subscriber, my entire article yesterday was kind of about this topic, where it's like, I know we're all looking at the eye candy right now. We're all enthralled by adding a Max Crosby, or let's not forget where this defense was last year. And if they run it back to where it was, that team was good enough to win the Super Bowl 10 times over. Like, they were the best team in football through 13 weeks. They were, by just about every stat you could look at. And to act like this team has to take another big leap, they need a big swing, is ignoring what they accomplished for the majority of the season. And the reason why they didn't win it was because they were depleted by the end, not because they hadn't made an all-in move.
Yep.
So, just I think a lot of times as we get further and further away from a season, I feel like we forget how you got there.
That they won 15 games.
You forget that they went 15-2. And all you remember is the fact that the defense was terrible at the end, and they had no pass rush, and Washington did whatever they wanted with them, and Jared Goff's terrible, and all this stuff that you're left with that one lasting impression, and you forget everything else.
Next question I'd like to address is, has Hendon Hooker become more valuable as a trade chip than a backup? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say he's more valuable as a backup. They drafted him in the 3rd round because they wanted to get a reliable quarterback to back up Jared Goff. So many people look at, and I'm not saying Romeo's doing this, I'm just saying in general.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who look at a team and say, you need depth here, depth here, depth here, depth here. You need depth at receiver, depth on the edge. Oh, you don't need quarterback depth. That guy's never going to play because you have a starter.
Right.
It's the most important position on the field, and to have a quality backup is worth a price. It's worth a 3rd rounder, in my opinion. And so I don't care if Hendon never plays a snap in his entire contract. The idea of having him there, I think, is incredibly valuable, and it should give the coaching staff some peace of mind. If you want to come at me and say, well, why did they get Teddy Bridgewater? Well, they got Teddy because of his leadership. Well, why was Teddy active in the playoff game? Because he's played in a playoff game, and if in case there was something weird,
you're eating into one of our questions.
Oh, I am. I'm sorry.
That's
sorry.
Okay.
But in my opinion, I think Hendon is incredibly valuable, and you're not drafting a quarterback to replace Goff, but you're drafting someone. Look, there's not 32 NFL starting quarterbacks in the league. Okay. So expecting to have a starting level quarterback as your backup it's not realistic, in my opinion. And so, but if you have a consistent quarterback who has potential as your backup, awesome. It's a huge part of building a team that can have sustainable success.
I think there's an interesting other half of that question,
sure,
which is how much value does he have as a trade piece? And I don't have a good
in my opinion
of what that might be, but I don't think it's anything more than a day 3 pick.
In my opinion, people that I have suggested that he is like a valuable trade piece because I'm with you. I don't think there's that much value in it. It's making him out to be more than what he is, right. Which is he's an older quarterback for a guy who's on a rookie deal, which is not going to be appealing to a trade team, but it's fine if he's actually on your team. That's right. Fine. And he has upside, which will be appealing, but you're not going to see a team trade for Hendon Hooker and be like, this is the guy who's going to start for us. You know what I mean? Like, right. So that also is going to kill his value. So I think he's more, that's why I think he's more valuable to the Lions because of his age, because of his upside, because of
he knows his system, right? Like
his experience. Yes. He's experienced in this system, but not anywhere else.
Right.
Those are all more valuable to Detroit than they are to anybody else.
And I think you're seeing a lot of times when people are orchestrating these mock trades for whoever it is, Garrett or Max or whatever, they're throwing in Hendon Hooker, which, I mean, sure, if you want to, but I think you're overvaluing how much that tips the scales. I don't think it tips the scales much at all because in a way it's hurting the Lions more than it's helping the other team, right? So why would the Lions throw in something that will hurt them more than help the other team? It doesn't make sense.
Is the
you want the opposite. You want to trade someone who won't hurt you as much but will help them a lot. That's how you orchestrate a trade. And so I just think like if you're like, oh, a first rounder and Hendon Hooker for Max Crosby, it's like that's a first and a sixth. If that's what you think it's going to take to get Max Crosby, just throw in a sixth. Don't throw in your backup quarterback.
Right. This is going to make people mad.
But I'm excited now.
If I'm trading for Hendon, I'm probably not valuing him more than like a Joshua Dobbs.
Right.
Like
yes.
It's an upside guy. He's got some mobility, got some accuracy. Like there's intriguing parts about him, but I'm not investing. He's not going to be my future quarterback. Like that's what an opposing team is going to look at Hendon. So what's Josh Dobbs' trade value? It's a day. It's like a day 3 pick, right? Like that's right. Yeah. Like, but for Detroit, it's a guy who knows the system. It's a guy who's been in place. It's a guy who's, there's some upside to him. And you're just in another year, like you're building up stability. And so
the only way to me that you could get something more than like a 5th or 6th from Hendon Hooker is if you find a team that was obsessed with him in the draft.
Sure.
But at the same time, the Lions got him in the 3rd round. There wasn't anyone that obsessed with him.
They traded back twice too. Right. They were like, well, we could take him here, but let's just trade back and get some more pick. Oh, let's trade back and get some more pick. Look, I liked Hendon when he played at Tennessee. I thought there was a lot of appeal to him, but at the same time, I don't think he's a guy that you're expecting to lead a franchise. Now, could he be? I don't know. Maybe we'll have to see more of what he can do. But like right now, he looks like a solid backup that you can count on. He's a Gardner Minshew, like maybe a lesser version of Gardner right now, but maybe has the potential to exceed that.
Let me get through a couple alerts here and we'll answer 1 or 2 more questions and jump back into the show here. Nick the Greek 100-bit says, hear me out. Myles Garrett and Deshaun Watson for Hendon Hooker, Taylor Decker, and 4 third-round picks. Browns do a reverse signing bonus. It's a thing I made up. And Lions eat $30 million in dead money. This is only my 3rd best trade scenario. Love it. Pull the trigger. You're the new... why can't I think of the Lions front office guy? That does
Disner?
You're the new Disner, Nick the Greek. Congratulations. Dirty Gert, 7 months. Subscribe to the channel. Throws a bunch of lions and kneecaps and all that stuff in the chat. Appreciate the support. Dirty Gert. And Nick the Greek, another 100 bits, says, I no longer give credit to takes about the importance of a seasoned backup for culture and support because I've heard Chase Daniels open his mouth as an NFL commentator. What coach would ever give that guy $8 million per year for his expertise and locker room presence? Oh, wait, I know who. Wow. All right. Dolo Dynamite has been all capsing several times in the chat and wants to know, would you trade for Kwity Paye for a third? Now, I'll be honest, I have not followed Kwity Paye's career since he got drafted out of Michigan, but I'll give you the financial aspect of it. He's entering the final year of his rookie deal. His 5th year option appears to have been activated, so he will cost $13.4 million in guaranteed salary this year. Final year of his deal.
I think a third. You're talking pick 101 if you're talking a third.
Yeah. So almost a fourth.
Kwity went in the first round.
Yep, 21 overall.
He's got the size, and he's played opposite Aiden before.
Yes.
It's an interesting question.
4 sacks, 6 sacks, 8.5 sacks, 8 sacks is the trajectory of his career so far. If you're just looking at,
it's not bad. It's not bad. I don't think he's been exceptional. I don't think he's been considered Pro Bowl, edge of the Pro Bowl or anything like that. I think he's. What's his run defense?
Look at his PFF grades really quick. Not that that's an end all be all, but run defense 76.6, 78.1, 67.4 in the last 3 years. Pressures
That's not bad. That's good. That's actually really good.
He's never had more than 40 pressures.
Yeah, he's a run. So he's a run edge, and with the Colts, right?
Yeah,
he's probably got to be their run
only
edge.
265 though.
That's okay. So that's Davenport. I mean, we're talking about Marcus Davenport. I don't know if I've ever seen Kwity drop. Probably doesn't drop much.
Nope.
Would be my guess.
8 coverage snaps last year.
I don't remember him dropping.
But a 69.8 grade.
Oh, all right, there you go.
He apparently allowed a 29-yard reception somehow.
Look, it's interesting to me. I just don't know what the value is. I don't know if, for a third rounder for Brad, I don't think he'd care but
right.
You got to remember, you got to put it in perspective. He gave up a third rounder for Carlton.
Right. So that's what I was going to compare it to.
Yeah.
A guy in the final year of his contract. So
you're expecting to start.
You're expecting to start, but you're also making that trade with the acknowledgement that it might only be for 1 year.
And you're expecting for an edge guy, you're probably expecting 60-70% of snaps. I wonder if that's, I got to imagine he's been given that, right? So,
yeah,
because he's been starting for them. So I got to imagine he's
about
in that range.
600 per year. A little bit more.
That's closer to half, I would think. Oh, no, that's probably closer to 60. No, that's probably not bad. I don't know. I'd have to look at the Colts.
It's probably pretty close to 60.
I just looked that up real fast. Colts snap counts.
Yeah, because it's like 40 to 45 a game, ish, which is.
Yeah, he's 57.6%.
Yeah,
so it's close to 60. I mean, so maybe you're hoping he gives you a little bit more, but I mean, it's not unreasonable. Yeah. Not an unreasonable proposal.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, we have no idea.
A lot of proposals we get are not great. So,
out of the general average of our proposals, that one definitely falls on the reasonable side.
Yeah.
Of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But this is also just thrown out of nowhere. It's not like the Colts have put him up for auction, so to speak. Steel Lion, they give her the 25 months, says 2 years already. Seems like yesterday. Go Lions. Go Lions, Steel Lions. Okay. I think we should get back into the show.
Okay.
All right. Let's do it. And we are back here on the Midweek Mailbag, taking your Detroit Lions questions. A couple weeks out from the NFL Combine, about a month away from free agency. Let's turn our attention to some draft a little bit. This is kind of a more general question about the draft, but I think it's an interesting mind experiment here. From Logan, says, let's say both prospects are equal in talent. Would you prefer a defensive tackle or an edge at 28th overall?
Edge, because the edge is asked to do more, and I think it's a bigger glaring need in the immediacy. Tends to be a more highly valued position as far as what you're going to produce down the road. You'd rather have an edge guy under contract for 5 years. When you're talking about re-signing, again, you probably like that 5th-year option for that edge as opposed to the interior. But so if all things are equal, I'd go edge, but in a bubble.
Right. It's a positional value thing, right?
Sure.
It's just edges are harder to find. Edges cost more money when you get to free agency. So if you have an edge on a rookie deal, it's saving you money in comparison to a high-end a defensive tackle. When you're talking about the line specifically, though, I'm I know all the talk has been about adding an edge opposite Aiden, but there is something to me of adding a defensive tackle opposite Alim as a long-term answer that is very, very appealing to me. And since everyone is, talking about the Philadelphia Eagles this week, they to me are a prime example of a team that their strength on the defensive line might be their defensive tackle, their interior. The reason they're able to get so much pressure and cause so much havoc is the interior guys, not the exterior guys. Now, you don't have to build yourself exactly like the Eagles did, but to me, if you can pair someone who can crush the pocket just as well or even better than Alim McNeill on that defensive line, that can be just as impactful as adding a pass rushing edge.
Yeah, the trick with the Lions last year is that their scheme called for a DJ Reader type of nose that can help Alim get freed up. And then behind Alim, you're hoping to get some production out of Levi as well. With Reader being in the last year of his contract, Shepard promoted to defensive coordinator, and Levi potentially not returning. It could go a variety of different ways. It's possible that they say, hey, look, Reader, I know you played a ton, probably more than you were expecting, but we want to add another 3 technique. So we're running dual 3s with Alim and a new guy.
Right.
And then Reader, you're going to play more a complementary role. You're still going to play 40-50% of snaps, but let's say you're down to 40%, which is probably more realistic for age, position, and responsibilities. And so now we're going to add a 3 technique in a lot more. And that could make sense. Like if they needed to pivot that way. And so, if they want to do that and you want to target a 3 technique, like in the 1st or 2nd round, you're going to have options in this draft class.
The counter to my own argument, of course, is that the Lions still have a couple of edge guys that can kick in on pass rushing downs and be that extra pass rushing threat right next to Alim McNeill anyways. And so if you just load up on more edge guys, you can kick Aiden in on 3rd down and then just have this new edge guy take over where he was. So you can make both work. If you are talking it from a pure positional value vacuum situation, I'm with you. You take the edge, but I think you can get plenty of value from both positions that deep in the draft, particularly this draft, it sounds like. Speaking of Alim McNeill a lot, I've seen a lot of speculation about when he's going to return, and that led to this question from Max says, is it true Alim won't be back until mid-season? Now, the most simple answer right off the top is we don't know. Let me be clear there. I don't think there's anything certain that he's going to be ready by the regular season. I don't think there's anything certain out there that he won't be ready to start at the beginning of the regular season. But there's some historical context to ACL injuries in terms of specific positions, in terms of weight. All those things matter, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The bigger you are, the longer your recovery time, but the younger you are, the faster your recovery time. So it's entirely possible that Alim in his youth is able to beat the recovery time of what a normal 325 pounder would be able to do. And so it's possible that he's able to come back and he returns sometime in training camp. It's also possible because he's a bigger body guy that requires a lot more strain on his joints that he isn't able to return at the beginning of the season and may not be ready to come back until week 8 or whatever it might be. So, yeah, it's a bit of an unknown. But I certainly am not saying by that it's a foregone conclusion that he's out. Like I think there's a realistic possibility that he's back and ready to go, but nothing's for certain.
It's not the same injury, but the timeline is almost identical to DJ Reader last year. They suffered their injuries almost on the exact same date. I think one was December 16th, one was December 17th.
And what's interesting is that Reader is a little bit bigger and was a lot older. Right. And so and he was able to kind of mitigate that timeline. And again, hip injury for him. So
quad.
Different. Oh, quad. Thank you.
Yeah, torn quad versus torn ACL. So they're not the same. They're not the same injuries.
Correct. You're talking about muscle instead of joint, right?
But I think that's the trajectory that we're looking at. Where with DJ Reader, the entire offseason, we're like, is he going to avoid the pup or is he not going to avoid the pup? And we weren't sure. And I think that's where we're going to be entering training camp, or at least offseason program with Alim, where it's not entirely clear whether he's going to be on the pup to start the season, which would mean he'd miss the first 4 games, or maybe there's an opportunity for him to start the season.
Yeah, Dan's going to get asked a lot of questions too, and he's going to basically give you something similar to what we just said. We'll see. And
Alim was one of the 10 or so guys that were available to talk on locker cleanout day, and he basically just gave us the, hey, I'm not looking. We don't have a timeline yet. Let's see. You can take that as maybe a negative sign, as he's not willing to commit. I'm going to be ready by training camp. You could take it as, I just don't have enough information. Like, I'm just getting off of crutches, or he wasn't off crutches by then. It'd only been less than a month, so we'll see. Yep. I don't. If anyone is telling you for certain at this point, they are just speculating, is what I would say to your question. Next question here from All Lions Go to Heaven. The Fox Magnet on Twitter says, maybe impossible to answer, but was Teddy Bridgewater quarterback 2 in the playoffs because Hooker hadn't developed, or because they trusted Teddy's experience?
It's Teddy's experience. They needed somebody who could step into a game with pressure and cold and be able to throw one pass and hand it off to J-Mo on an end round for 60 yards. And Teddy gave him that ability.
Yeah, I mean, Dan kind of answered this question. He got ahead of it, right? Like, I think he knew.
Yes.
Someone had asked, like, hey, is Teddy going to be your QB2? And he said, I don't know, but just if he is, like, that is not an indication that Hendon's not where we're at. It's an indication of like what we have to think about with this backup quarterback situation is like, who gives us the best chance to win right now? Is it going to be a guy who's been in the league for 10 years, or is it going to be a guy who's never taken a meaningful regular season snap and has only had one preseason for live bullets, So I think it was a very shrewd and smart move considering the stakes. And it kind of paid off. I'm not saying Hendon Hooker couldn't have made the plays that Teddy Bridgewater could have. He very well could have. But
probably.
Yeah, probably.
but if they needed more than one series, well, we don't know.
Right. And it's also not just about executing those plays. It's, okay, you get to the line. Is it the look you want? If it's not, you got to change to the right play.
Right.
I don't know if Teddy Bridgewater had to do that necessarily, but you had to have a guy who was prepared to do those sort of things. And so I think you go into 2025 assuming that Hendon's going to be your number 2, but they're going to bring in competition too. Probably a veteran guy. Probably do the same kind of thing they did these past years, where it's like throwing a 30-year-old out there with Hendon Hooker and hope that Hendon Hooker wins.
I'm actually a little more confident in Hendon than maybe you are. I am.
I just think you're going to bring a guy in. You're going to bring a third quarterback in, and it's probably not going to be a young guy.
Well, so you have Jake Fromm, right?
I forgot about Jake Fromm. True.
And so you've got 3 quarterbacks under contract. And could they bring a veteran in? It would be easier to bring a veteran in. But I think they'll bring someone in to compete with the expectation of them not beating out Hendon. You know what I mean?
No, I certainly think the expectation for me, for the coaching staff, for everyone in that building is probably Hendon Hooker's your backup this upcoming season.
I would certainly think so. And it wouldn't be surprising to me if they just went Goff, Hendon, Braum, and then added a couple of undrafted guys. That wouldn't surprise me at all either. Yeah. So there's not a lot of really good backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And so, you can get a guy off a scrap heap and say, hey, come in and, compete. Or you could try and find the next Jeff Braum.
Right. Jake.
But yeah, Jake. See, that illustrates my point that I messed that up.
I do. Because there was a significant amount of Jake Fromm hype towards the end of the preseason.
Yeah, he wasn't a bad quarterback, but he'd never done anything in the NFL, and then all of a sudden he exploded.
He lead him to a game-winning drive or something. I feel like that happened in the preseason.
Yeah, that third preseason game, he looked fantastic. It was shocking.
Right.
No one was expecting it.
What I'm curious is, and this is just my own curiosity, doesn't really mean anything. I'm curious if there's going to be a portion of the fan base that once we get to training camp think that Jake Fromm will be the backup.
100% there's going to be.
Okay.
There is of course people that are going to be like, I saw what Fromm did in the second half of the third preseason game, and therefore he is better than the quarterback than Hendon Hooker because Hendon Hooker's too old.
He's
100%.
He hasn't done anything in 2 years here. Yeah, you're right.
Not. That's good. That's a good thing.
Let's stay on Bridgewater really quick because this is a question that I think we get asked every once in a while, and I want to reiterate what's out there. So Tamor over on our Pride of Detroit Direct subscribers says thoughts on bringing in Teddy Bridgewater onto the staff. From all accounts, he's very well respected, had a history with Dan Campbell, won a championship in his lone season as a high school coach, and is a mentor to many players on this team. If it was the Lions' decision, the answer would be yes. They would love him. No question. He might be the assistant quarterbacks coach right now, maybe the quarterbacks coach. They may have let Mark Brunell be an offensive coordinator somewhere, kicked him out the door and said, Teddy Bridgewater, you're the new quarterbacks coach. He doesn't want to do it.
Teddy, he has a passion for coaching youth football right now. He absolutely he is a very community oriented person, and he is in a I want to give back mode. And so he wants to coach high school football. He wants to impact the youth in his home, in his hometown. He wants to be able to give back in that way. Yet he's still keeping his contacts with the NFL. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. When he is ready to take the next step, I fully expect the Lions to hand. Oh yeah, if
I would not put it as when. I would if you're a Lions fan and you're just waiting for Teddy Bridgewater to come back and be part of the Lions offensive coaching staff, my answer to you would be don't hold your breath.
If he decides he wants to, I expect the Lions to already have a contract pre-written out.
Right. Might as well just have his locker in the locker room and just an envelope with a contract. Just when you're ready.
Just a blank check.
Yeah.
Here you go. Keep it reasonable, Teddy.
Right. I think you nailed not only his current feelings, but why he feels that way is because he is coaching high school football, not out of love of football. He's doing it out of love of community. It's doing he loves giving youth an opportunity, a chance, a pipeline to something bigger.
Yes.
If you read, there's a fantastic article. I want to say it was Mike Sando, maybe. No, it was someone else. From The Athletic, wrote about the entire year that Teddy Bridgewater's had, and he talks about how much of his own money he invested into the football program so that some of these people would just have a place to eat, lunch, dinner, to have 3 meals a day. They talked about a kid who was down in the he lost both of his parents, did not have a a structure in his life anymore, and he thought, his life was over before out of high school, and he gave this guy some hope, gave him an opportunity to perform on the football field, and now he has a college scholarship. Like, that's the kind of difference he's looking and making, not trying to put a ring on his finger.
Dan Pompei.
That's Dan Pompei. Thank you. Yep. Yes. And then he was also straight up asked this year in December, hey, when you won your championship in high school, you're here in the playoff run. After this playoff run, how about coaching the NFL ranks? And his answer was, nah, I like sleeping. I like my sleep.
There's a lot of coaches though that in today's NFL that not necessarily took this route, but like they wanted to coach at the high school level, and then eventually that passion evolved into more.
Yeah.
Randall L was like that.
Randall L. Brunell also high school before he got to the Lions.
Mm-hmm. Brunell used to run quarterback camps.
That's right.
Where he would help college guys get prepared for the NFL as well. So, and eventually that evolved into having bigger goals. And Randall L. when Randall L. retired from football, he said, I don't even want my kids playing this. I'm worried about concussions. He took a hard line, and then as he got away from the game, he was like, okay, maybe I was a bit harsh, too close to the moment, too emotional in my retirement. Now I'm starting to look at it. Now I want to give back. Then it evolved. Then it's like, oh, I want bigger things. And then he's expanded, and now he's got head coaching aspirations, which could be in his future down the line as well. But like, he's a great example of how his life is much different a decade removed.
Right.
And so Teddy, we'll see what happens with Teddy. Teddy has all the intangibles to be a head coach in the NFL.
No question.
Like, he has all the characteristics of it.
Yep.
And so when he gets there, if he gets there, how he gets there, we're going to have to watch it play out over the next however long.
No question. All right, we'll close out with this another question here from Pride of Detroit Direct, and I know this one has been one that a lot of people have been itching about, and it may have been one that I brought up last year during last year's draft. But Paul C. asks, thoughts on Brad Holmes' reassessing the strategy of drafting developmental players like Giovanni Manu and Broderick Martin in round 3 that won't bear fruit until 2 or 3 years down the line, or possibly never. In those cases, they used additional capital to get them as well, so they traded up to get both those players. Knowing how tight roster spots will be, can they afford to keep deploying that strategy, or do they need to consider more ready players in these rounds?
Excuse me. The trick is, if you draft a player in the 3rd round, might they even compete on a roster that's as deep as the Lions? Yeah. That's a legitimate question, because they're getting to that point.
Right.
I think he could change his strategy and say, we need more depth. We saw that because of the injury, so we need to have more insurance plans as opposed to, develop.
Sure.
At the same time, I could also see him saying, yeah, we're at a stage where we have enough guys, and we can pick guys with huge upsides that we want to develop, and just stick with it. I could see him going either way at this point. I think as a fan, I personally would rather see a guy who's ready to compete now. And I totally get that ideology. At the same time, I kind of get where Brad's coming from, where he's like, the talent is immense. And so I want to take the gamble that what this kid could turn into. But I'm with Paul. I'd rather see guys that are ready now as opposed to 2-3 years from now. I just don't know if we're ever going to get to that spot with Holmes where he's going to say,
right,
I need this guy to be ready now.
It's tricky. I think the long answer is, or the short answer is, there has to be a balance, right? You can take these stabs at guys that are going to be 2 to 3 years down the line, but you can't make it your only strategy for those middle rounds. You're going to eventually need guys who are not only depth, but maybe guys that can eventually start, or guys that can play in a pinch right away, or guys that are going to contribute at least on special teams. Because realistically speaking, it is not wise to carry a Broderick Martin, a Hendon Hooker, a Giovanni Manu. In some cases, you can even throw Colby Sorsdal in there. Like guys that are just, they're never going to get off the inactive list. Now, with some of those cases, they will eventually get off the inactive list. But like, you can't carry so many healthy inactives on your roster, on your 53, let alone when you got into a situation last year where you're pulling guys off the street to play.
Go ahead. I was just saying, can I?
Go ahead.
My question was, I don't know if they viewed Broderick Martin. I think Broderick gets grouped into this, he's a developmental guy. I think they expected him to develop for a year and then contribute in year 2, and maybe he just didn't get there.
That's fair.
Like, there's it's very possible that he just missed.
Yeah.
Like he misses so rarely that we just assume
that was going to be
part of the
point.
plan. Right. Okay, go ahead.
The other part of my point is that Lions fans have gotten extremely spoiled by day 2 picks.
Yes.
Extremely
and 3.
Spoiled. Like, yeah, 3rd and 4th round. Because the first draft, we're talking Alim McNeill, Ifatu Melifanu, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Derek Barnes. 3rd and 4th round picks. Next year, Kirby Joseph is your only 3rd or 4th round pick. And then now you look ahead in the last 2 drafts, and it's nowhere near that level. It's Hendon Hooker, Broderick Martin, Giovanni Manu, Sione Vaki. Like, not even close to the same level. But let's be clear.
It's a different team.
What Brad Holmes did in 2021 and 2022 is not normal. You do not find all pros on day 2 and day 3 very often.
Right.
Even a guy
opportunity in those seasons was there.
True. That is the other part. Like it's not just that they were good players, but they got the opportunity to play and grow and get better on the field. We keep talking about how important it is to actually get reps, important reps that matter. It's why they keep trying to make an XFL or a UFL, so these guys are actually developing on the field, and it makes it harder for a guy like Giovanni Manu and Broderick Martin and whoever else you want to throw into that conversation with Colby Sorsdal if you want. Those guys aren't getting the meaningful reps, so their development is naturally going to be slower. Doesn't mean they're bad players, doesn't mean they won't ever grow up to be good players, but those early draft picks were given a unique opportunity for a rebuilding team to just go out there and learn.
Like with Vaki, they looked at that and said, this is the opportunity to get the best special teams player in the draft. And they're like, it's worth it to go get the guy we think is the best special teams player. He's going to be instant contributor in those areas, and we'll just bring him along a little slowly on at the running back position because we have 3 guys that we like. You know what I mean? And so there's no rush. But if there's no Craig and Vaki's RB3, he maybe is further along. You know what I mean? And so opportunity is a huge part of it. I think so. I agree. The style of guy that they're targeting now is, well, we're not going to draft a guy in the 3rd round that's going to compete to start at any position on our roster because we're too deep pretty much everywhere. Yeah. So let's take that and go get a guy that we can develop, or let's take it and go get a guy who we know can compete on special teams and is the best special teams value guy. And so that's kind of where he shifted it last year. It was a 3rd rounder isn't going to compete for a starting job. It's just he'd have to exceed expectations. And the same is going to be true this year. Any 3rd rounder that they take at 101, that guy is going to have to exceed expectations to challenge for a spot. So the realistic expectation, if you're talking about a guy that's contributing now, he's a backup. He's contributing for a backup role right now. It's going to be hard to break into this roster, especially when you add more free agents to a roster that is still very much intact in a lot of ways. So it's going to be hard to see these draft picks compete unless the opportunity comes their way, unless you're mahogany, unless all of a sudden it's there's a starting role and you've jumped in the depth and now you're in a spot.
But I think I think the middle ground here is let's not. It's okay if we don't get a starter in round 3, but let's not get a guy that we won't even put on the field for 3 years. We won't even part of our active 46, 47,
Sure.
48, whatever. Like, there needs to be a middle ground. There needs to be a little bit of those picks where it's like, okay, you're playable. Okay, you are a backup. You are a rotational guy. You can get those guys in the third round. And I think just over the past couple of years, Holmes has gotten a little, I want to even say cocky. I think he's got a little bit more.
He's
risky.
Picking specific roles,
Right.
like a backup quarterback,
Yes.
a special teams demon. I think I honestly, I just think I think they expected Broderick to compete, and he just isn't there.
100%. There was one game this year where they're like, okay, we think you're ready. And then like he got like 15 snaps. He was terrible. The Lions got run all over that one drive, and they're like, oh, no, we'll pull the plug. That may have been his rookie season. I don't know. Either way.
No, he had one. I think it was closer to 5 reps though. But yeah, he's just, I don't think he's just ready. I think if you watch him, he's, for a guy his size, he's very athletic, but his technique is just not where it needs to be. And his technique, now keep in mind, he's also had 2 different defensive line coaches, and now he's going to be on his third.
Yep.
And so maybe that'll, I don't know if that's going to help or hurt, but I just don't think Broderick is where he needed to be. And I think Sorsdal was probably in line to compete, and then they needed to switch his position to get more depth on the outside because they were going lighter at tackle, and Gio wasn't going to be ready. Yeah. And then he just got passed. I think he got passed by other guys that were playing well. Like the offensive line reserves, I thought they all played well. I thought Skipper played better than I thought he would.
Yeah.
Coyote, like, he was playing well, and then he got passed by Mahogany, who was playing better.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, the only one that throws me a little bit is Nice, but you were using him specifically at center, and I think he's going to be threatened by Kingsley.
Right.
I don't mess up his
Iguacan.
I got to get back in the rhythm of saying his name, because I feel like he's going to be a guy who's going to be like pushing. His talent's there.
Yeah.
Talent's there. It's just needs a little bit more time.
Right. I think people just want to see a little bit more Christian Mahogany's out of those middle rounds than Giovanni Manu's. Guys that are going to take some seasoning, right?
I think Manu's the only one that's really like that long term of Broderick. Right.
But Broderick. But I think the point being is, when you picked Broderick Martin, you were instilling a lot of faith that you could develop a guy that was very far away. And
maybe they thought he was closer, or maybe he hasn't taken the step.
They did think he was closer, and they were wrong.
Well, maybe he's just. And again,
I'm just saying that's the risk you run when you get one of these really small school projects, or guys that don't, that play in Canada, is that it's not just that it's going to take a long time. There's a risk that he never gets there.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I think Brad has upped the intensity in terms of his risk taking. Something I literally point out after the 2024 draft. And maybe it works out in the long term, maybe it doesn't, but I think people are right to at least acknowledge that he took some risks in these last couple drafts that at the moment hasn't paid off.
I think he's taken them in every draft though. Like James Houston was a risk, and that's
a late 6th.
Okay, but like, so was Mahogany, and so right?
That wasn't a risk though. He was pro ready.
He was. He should have went in the 3rd. But
we're talking about the mid rounds.
Okay,
where you can get depth.
I hear you. I just it's an interesting. He has a style that I don't think he has a philosophy. I just don't think he's going to change it that much. I think in his head, it's working, and so.
And for the most part, it is. Let's be clear. He's built great roster.
Would I like a 4th round pick that could be in Kendall Vildor's spot? Yeah, sure. Right. Like that's great. Yep. If he could play at a level that Kendall plays at, and you get him in the 3rd or 4th round, super. That's great. You're filling the need with some future upside. Like, and he's gotten specific, and I think he's missed a couple of times more than we'd like to say, but he's still hitting on more than he misses for sure.
This team had 6 All-Pros or whatever. He's put him in a pretty good position.
Yeah,
let's not lose the forest through the trees. I don't know if I say that idiom all the time and I get it wrong. But that one, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it at that. If you want more midweek mailbag content, jump over to YouTube or Twitch, watch us live, watch us on replay. We answer a whole bunch of questions in between segments. If you want even more than that, we're going to have a subscribers only midweek mailbag at the end of the month. I might be recording that one live from the NFL Combine or a hotel near the NFL Combine, so that'll be a fun episode. But until then, that's Erik. I'm Jeremy. Thank you all for listening. It's chaos. Be kind.
Recording stopped.
All right. Hang around for a little bit here. Oh, you only got 6 minutes, so I didn't realize we were running it that close.
No, that's fine. We're all right.
Brett Whitefield in the chat says trench players from small schools and or Canada are risky because you have no idea how they will respond to repeatedly getting punched in the face or in the mouth by actual NFL players their size. It's a fair point. I wonder if that makes it, would you say maybe it's more risky to take a trench small school player than other positions? I mean, obviously the challenge of facing increased competition is there no matter what position you are. Like quarterback, I would imagine, is very tough.
I would think small school, and I'm just speculating here, but I would think it would be easier to play offense from a small school than defense. But that
making the jump from small school on offense is harder.
No, easier. I think if you, because as an offensive player, you're dictating where you're going. As a defensive player, you're reacting, right? And so I would think the transition would be a little smoother, like wide receiver, as opposed to.
Brett says in the chat, we've done case studies on this. Bust rate on small school trench players is much higher than guys like wide receiver, running back, defensive back.
There you go.
Interesting. Publish that stuff, but not behind like massive paywalls. Not massive. I shouldn't say massive. You're giving that information to teams directly, aren't you? We don't even get to see that stuff. Thoughts? So this is another thing that I've seen a lot of questions about, including in our own Slack. So Eagles, they win the Super Bowl. They're going to open the 2025 season Thursday Night Football at home. The Lions are one of their 9 home game opponents. What do you think? Is that where they're going to go with it?
I always think it's an option, right?
Yeah. So Schefter did a whole segment of his podcast on this, and you will never guess what team he concluded. And I mean that.
I gotta see their schedule. I don't know. Hold on.
So they have obviously their division opponents. They have
Dallas, Giants, Washington.
Sure,
Washington would be fun, but will they start with the division? Lions, Denver, Rams, Tampa. Tampa would be a good one because they lost to Tampa.
They lost to the Rams, or they beat the Rams though in the playoffs.
Yeah, I know, but they lost to Tampa in the regular season. Mm-hmm. Oh wait, it's at Tampa. Why did they shift that on me? Like they had all the ats at the beginning, and then they did the homes, and then they. Did he pick LA?
Nope.
Did he pick Lions?
Nope.
Denver?
Nope. He mentioned Denver as like, hey, maybe.
Oh, if he picked Chicago, I'm gonna be done. That's so dumb.
He picked Chicago.
Why?
He's making my prediction now. Ben Johnson's first game. They might be one of those up and coming teams. Most of his argument that I agreed with was like, I think the NFL is going to want to save Eagles Lions for a bigger stage. I know it seems like opening week is the biggest
like
stage,
they did with San Fran.
Yeah.
Monday night late in the season.
Right. That's what that's his argument for not making it Lions or not making it Rams. He's like, those games are going to get big ratings anyways. Don't stick it in week 1.
You had Lions KC, and that one was a big draw.
Sure, but I think he would use that almost as an argument for the Bears. Like, the Lions didn't make the playoffs that previous year. They were 9-8, but
yeah.
But like, you know what's going to happen with the Bears this offseason. People are going to ride. They're going to be the cutesy pick for the team that are going to first, worst to first. They're going to be the head candidate amongst all the worst teams, the last place teams to go last to first. They're going to be the kitschy pick.
Not in this division.
But I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen.
They're going to take out. They're going to pass the Lions. They're going to pass Sam Darnold. They're going to pass. They're
going to bring him back.
I hope so.
Because there have been some erroneous reports out there recently about their interest in bringing Sam Darnold back.
I hope so.
There was another good question here. Let me see if I can find it. Any updates on John Kaminsky's health? Do you think he will be back at training camp with the Lions this fall? Well,
look, they were talking about him being potentially ready playoffs at one point, and then he had a little setback, right? So that's why he should be healthy,
right,
soon.
Yeah, because if you remember, the injury happened either before training camp or during training camp, and they did not put him on IR right away because they did the whole let's make the initial 53-man roster,
see if he can make it. Yeah,
to see if he can. The idea was that they thought he was eventually going to come back, and at some point that changed. I don't know if there was a specific comeback or if he didn't progress at the rate that they were expecting, but it was close enough for them to expect there to be a chance, and so he should be ready to go. I would imagine, if not soon.
Yeah, he's not under contract, and we don't know exactly what the scheme's going to be. And one of the I don't think we were quiet about it. He was on the bubble.
Oh yeah.
Before injury.
Yep.
And so
his 2023 season was not that good.
Yeah. And he wasn't playing really well last training camp either.
Yeah.
So he's an interesting guy, great leadership. They love that about him. Position flexibility, but I'm not sold that he is a priority.
Yeah. Depth. I mean, it certainly would have been welcome depth last year, but that was last year.
Yeah, right.
Nick the Reek 100 Bits says Bears Twitter has been chicken soup for the soul these last 3+ years. Let them have their moment. This is their season. I know people used to say the exact same thing about the Lions.
Sure.
But yeah, it's their time to shine. Be optimistic because there's no actual proof that they're good yet.
We'll see how it goes. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch because Ben, you could see I
don't know where this is going.
I like Ben. But I could also see that whole thing just exploding. I never liked the fit in Chicago. I didn't think the styles quite matched. He's got enough coaching talent that he could turn that offense around and they could be competitive and they could be a threat. I could see that happening. At the same time, I could see the Bears be the Bears and run another coach out of town in 3 years and it not be Ben's fault at all. I could see that happening too. I don't know what to expect of it. I could see it going a lot of different ways.
I don't fault Lions fans for no longer being a fan of Ben Johnson. He went to
I like Ben a lot.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But some of the revisionist history stuff is comical to me at this point. I'm not mad at it because whatever. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure I saw something on Twitter today that was responding to us. I don't know if it was a question or whatever. That was I'm glad we have someone new at offensive coordinator. I'm sick of the glitz and glam. Sometimes you just need to run the football. I don't need all these trick plays. I don't need all these just run the ball down their throats. And I'm just
they do that. They do that too.
They did that. They had all the fun trick plays, and they produced the number one offense in football. What are you complaining about?
I think if Ben doesn't succeed in Chicago, won't be as much on him as it will just be on Chicago. Like there's some demons in that front office and ownership group that like have caused some problems. So I'm I I think it could all blow up, and I think Ben could be at fault for some things, but I don't think it would be entirely on him either. I could see that happening. Yeah, I don't. He's a very smart coach. He's a very good. He's a very nice person.
Yeah.
And all of my interactions with him have been nothing but pleasant. And so,
sure. All right, it is 4 past your deadline. I'm gonna give you one layup before you go. From Downgrade asks, what are your thoughts on Aaron Glenn's first move as Jets head coach?
I think he's looks like the smartest head coach in the league. I think he's just it's brilliant. I think he is a very no nonsense. It doesn't surprise me at all, and I fully support him. And kudos to Aaron Glenn. I wish him nothing but success. Goodbye.
And he's gone. He's gone. There you go. Dismounted. I want to expand on that, and then I'm going to get out of here too, because I don't know how, but I stumbled upon the Pat McAfee show Reddit channel. Is that what you call a Reddit thing? And I think Diana Rossini put out there that at some point, I don't even know if it was Glenn or the previous regime, approached Aaron Rodgers and say, hey, if you want to be a part of this organization, you talked about it yourself. Like, there can't be distractions in here. So we're respectfully asking you to stop going on Pat McAfee every week because it's distracting, because you're catching headlines for all the wrong reasons there. And of course, in the Pat McAfee subreddit, there you go. Everyone was like, the Jets are a joke. Why would they do this? Let this guy talk about whatever he wants to talk about. Pat McAfee, blah, blah, blah. But if you're Aaron Glenn and that was your line, one, it's a pretty interesting line to draw with Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure it wasn't the only thing. I think part of it was like, hey, we're trying to build a culture here about our team and our culture and keeping everything in house and protecting ourselves. We don't want you making these public appearances everywhere all the time, drumming up headlines. If you're starting to build a culture, I think that's a reasonable thing to want to understand. Now, does that mean throwing away a franchise quarterback over that lone example? No. But I think we can all agree that Aaron Rodgers' drama goes well beyond his weekly Pat McAfee appearances. And if that's not something he's willing to cut out of his life, then there are probably other issues that you're going to have with him, you know? And so I said this on the POD cast too. Like I talked to Jets fans for a couple weeks now about Aaron Glenn, and they kept asking me about Aaron Rodgers. And I'm like, I don't see a culture fit there at all. I see Aaron Glenn wanting a team that's not about individuals, that there's no egos in the room. They're all trying to work towards a common goal. And maybe other people that have been to Aaron Rodgers view him differently than I do. But what I see in Aaron Rodgers is an extremely selfish individual that may act like he's caring about his teammates in time. And maybe he does legitimately care about some of his teammates, but he's largely in it for his own attention. He doesn't seem like the type of person that has a lot of ownership of mistakes. And I'm not saying he publicly blames other people, but you see him scream at his teammates all the time. And so I don't see the culture fit at all. And if part of the bargain was, hey, you can stay here as long as you show that you're a team player by not showing up to Pat McAfee, by not doing this, by not doing that, maybe he did offer that last olive branch, and Rodgers was like, nah. This is important to me. I need the mic in front of me once a week. And if that's the case, then like, hey, that's a mutual split. No one needs to get upset about it. So, I mean, I could have told, I couldn't say with 100% certainty, but I felt like that was the way things were going to go, and not at all surprised that they did. All right. Woodchuck Hunter, thank you for the 30 months. Subscribe to the channel. Says 30 months of Lions incoming 30-game win streak. I'll take it. How much was the Lions win streak this last? Did they go 10 or 11? I don't remember. Week 3 to week whatever Bills game was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11. All right. I'm going to get out of here. Got some things to write, some stuff to take care of. Got to batten down the hatches for snowpocalypse, which it's apparently supposed to start in like an hour and a half. You guys stay safe out there. Drive safe if you're in the Michigan area or wherever's getting hammered by snow today. And I know Saturday is supposed to be even worse right now, but we're far away, so that might change. If you missed any of this, you can just scroll right back on YouTube, or once we're done here on Twitch, you can click in and watch the VOD. What else we got in store for you? Scraps probably coming your way on the podcast feed. You can always catch this there too. We always appreciate good reviews over there, good reviews, comments, whatever. I haven't checked in on our podcast reviews in a long time, mostly because I think generally they're bad for my mental health, even if they're majority good ones. I'm kind of one of those people that tends to over fixate on the bad ones. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys. We'll see you guys next live at the latest next Monday night for the main POD cast, but appreciate